Hey y'all, I'm Mandy.
And this is Monstrous. This episode contains topics and language that may not be suitable for all listeners and may be triggering for some. Listener discretion is advised. Okay. So before we get into today's episode, I want to apologize to everyone for last week. We were ready to record, all of that, but I had a family emergency over the weekend with my dad and just wasn't able to do it or really focus. So we decided to just take the week off so that way that situation could be handled. And it sort of was.
Right.
It's still ongoing at this moment. And then just come back this week and give you the episode that you guys deserve. So here we are. This is our 1-year episode.
I know, that's wild.
Right?
It doesn't even seem like a year.
I know, it's went by so fast.
It really has.
When I was looking, I was like, oh my God. That's just, one, it doesn't feel like it's August already. 2, we've been doing this for a year.
I know, it's crazy.
Neither one of those feels like it's possible.
Mm-mm.
So this week's episode hopefully will make up for missing last week. We have a big episode. We have 3 different cases to talk about.
Nice.
Yep. So it's going to be a little bit of a longer one, but it'll be fun. It'll be worth the listen. So if you're ready to jump in, we'll get started.
Let's do it.
Okay. So we're going to kick it off strong, right? Most people have heard about this one, but I'm going to tell you a little bit that you don't know about this one. So we're going to start with the infamous La Llorona. So many people have heard the tale of La Llorona, especially in the Hispanic culture, because that's where it comes from. But there are many that haven't heard from her. So we're starting it out with this gnarly one, because it's wild. So La Llorona is Mexican folklore. She is also known as the Weeping Woman. That's typically what us here in, America, non-Spanish speaking people call her. It's a tale of a woman who drowned her children after finding out that her husband had been unfaithful. But she is then fated to suffer alone. And instead of facing that fate, she wants to share that suffering with all of us. If you cross her path, you better be full of luck. Because those who have and heard her siren-like cry have found themselves with terrible luck and in some cases have even suffered tragic deaths.
Crazy.
Yeah. So the world around us is full of magic and good things, but at the same time, it's equally full of evil and scary things. There is no lack of whimsical creatures that are happy symbols and reward you for your good behavior, but there are just as many that punish you for bad behavior, and some do it just because they can. And for anyone that grew up in Latin America or that are of Latin American descent, there is one that stands out more than the rest. Nearly every one of these families knows her legend, and they all agree that no matter how old you are, she is terrifying. So as La Llorona translates, like I said, to the Weeping Woman, she is said to be dressed in either all white or all black, wearing a rebozo, which is like a scarf garment. It's very similar to like a shawl, and they kind of wear it like draped over the top of their head. These are very popular in Mexican culture. So many Hispanic women, you'll see them wearing these over their heads. So now if you get close enough to get a good look at her from behind, you may notice that she has something hidden underneath her scarf and shawl. This is something jagged and bumpy sticking out from her back. And legend says that these are the bones of La Llorona's victims that have been fused into her spine.
Shit, that's wild.
Yeah. So the legend further says that she wanders around shouting in Spanish, "Mijijos, mijijos, ¿dónde están mis hijos?" which translates to my children, where are my children? I'm pretty sure I said that correctly, but I might not have. I'm not fluent in Spanish. I know just a little bit. So Sorry if I didn't. So now there are a couple different legends to how La Llorona got her start, but there is a common thing amongst each one of them. So if you're comfy, we're going to dive into each one.
Let's do it.
Okay. So in one story, La Llorona reads like a fairy tale, except for the ending. Aside from taking place in Mexico a very long time ago, we don't know exactly where. So this story is La Llorona began her life as a woman named Maria. She was a married mother of 2, and she was said to be the most beautiful woman in her entire village. Men just kind of flocked to her, so she's constantly getting attention. But it's also said that she enjoyed this attention so much that she dated different men even after she was married.
Damn.
And one day, while her husband was away, she sent her 2 sons outside to play while she met with one of her secret lovers. Maria was completely distracted with her partner. And it was during this time that her boys ran off to a nearby river. Since no one was watching, as often as the case is, they fell into the water accidentally, and tragically both boys drowned.
Aww.
Once her lover left, Maria opened the door to call her boys home for dinner. When neither of them came running back, she, of course, panicked. She started searching everywhere for them, yelling, "Mijijos, mijijos." But there was no sign of them. And all Maria knew for sure was that something terrible must have happened to them. The legend says that Maria was so panicked and devastated that she burst into tears and continued to scream, my children, where are my children?" And she never stopped crying or searching for them.
That's sad.
Right. Like, she just keeps wandering around because she can't find them. But then again,
Yeah.
you know, it said that to this day, she still roams the earth mourning her loss. And to make the entire thing worse, it further says that if she sees any children who remind her of her children, she kidnaps them. And even more terrifying, it's also said that if a child's smile, eyes, or dimples resemble the features of her own children, she'll cut off that body part, leaving her victim permanently disfigured.
What the fuck? Damn, my guy.
So as disturbing as that account is, it's only one version of La Llorona's origin story. In other variations, she's a lot more complicit in the deaths of her children. So in other variations of the tale, Maria is faithful to her husband. She never cheats on him. But instead, he is not a good husband to her. And depending on the source, he's either extremely abusive, he has multiple affairs, or he neglects her. So at one point, Maria decides she's had enough. She wants to hurt her husband the same way that he's hurt her. And as we've seen more and more these days, unfortunately, she believes the way to do that is by taking away the thing that he loves most, his children. But packing up and disappearing with them in the middle of the night isn't enough for Maria. She wants to do something a little more permanent. So in a fit of fury, she murders her children. A lot of accounts say that she drowned them, while other versions say that she actually fed them to pigs.
Damn.
Yeah. Eventually, Maria snaps back to her senses. Once she does, she realizes what she had done, something that was unforgivable, and she could not live with the guilt. So she decided her only choice was to die by suicide. After she passes, Maria is said to go to heaven, but she can't get through those pearly white gates. The stain on her soul is too dark, and she'll never get in. It's something that will forever stain her, and she will never be able to get past what she's done. So, since she can't move on to the afterlife, Maria comes back to Earth instead as a vengeful spirit who to this day can never rest.
That's wild.
Yep. She's cursed to keep killing for all of eternity. So as far as this version goes, Maria doesn't limit herself to attacking and killing children. She also targets men because they remind her of her cruel husband. A cruel husband who also appears in another version of this story. Now, the one that I just told you where she drowns them because her husband's unfaithful, all that, that is the most popular. If you ask somebody the legend of La Llorona, that's the one that they're going to tell you. So this next one, it said that La Llorona's original name is not Maria, but instead Lucia. It said that she's a poor but very beautiful young woman living in the 1600s. Lucia ends up falling in love with a rich man who gives her everything she could ever want. She gets a beautiful house, fancy clothes, all the fancy food that she could ever want or need to eat. There's just one problem because, nothing is ever that fucking good.
Right.
The man won't marry her because she's a peasant.
Hmm.
Yeah. So even though they're not officially husband and wife, Lucia and the rich man make a good life for themselves. They end up having 3 children together, and they seem, to be in love and to be happy. But the man's loyalties are divided. He wants to be with Lucia and keep her happy, but he also has parents who are pressuring him to marry someone within his own class status. Because God forbid you marry someone, quote unquote, beneath you.
Right.
Ugh, please. Anyway. And eventually he chooses the latter. He abandons Lucia and their 3 children. He forces them to move out of his house and figure out how to support themselves.
That's fucked up.
Fuck you and them kids.
Right.
And just like in the last story, Lucia decides to get back at her ex by killing their children. In this version, she does this all while they're sleeping. And instead of drowning them, she stabs them with a dagger.
Holy shit.
But as soon as her children have passed, grief and regret completely wash over Lucia. Horrified by what she had done, she ran out into the street, screaming and crying in her white dress that is now covered in blood. And right away, the people of her village obviously knew something awful had happened. Like, this lady is just screaming in the streets covered in blood. Like, everything is not kosher over here. Like...
Right.
So it doesn't take long for the villagers to find the children's bodies and realize that Lucia was a murderer. And not long after, she was executed for her crimes. But Luisa's spirit stuck around, haunting the city forever. People see her wandering the streets, but only when the village is deserted or late at night. And if anyone lets her get too close or talks to her, they end up dead.
Dang.
So as I said, there are varying accounts and some inconsistencies to how La Llorona got her start. This could be because the Aztec people who were indigenous to Mexico were telling stories about La Llorona well before Europeans ever arrived on their shores. In these stories, a crying woman wandered through the town yelling that her children were in danger, but anyone who heard these cries knew to get the fuck out of there because according to them, La Llorona only appeared before disaster happened. But once Spanish settlers arrived, the stories about La Llorona evolved and incorporated more European influences. And so different communities within Latin America ended up with different versions. And then, they're just kind of passed down generation to generation. So some details may change, but the core of it stays the same ever since La Llorona came to be. So the woman has always been a mother with at least 2 children. And they die because of her sins, either because she was neglectful from having an affair or she kills them herself. Then afterwards, her guilt turns her into an immortal, inhuman creature that's out for blood. Now, according to rumors, you can tell if La Llorona is close because any nearby dogs will start to howl. And it's not just like any normal howl that a dog does. They go nuts. And of course, if you see a woman dressed in all white with a rebozo over her face, do not talk to her. Don't do it.
Run.
Right. Run the opposite direction. Now, like I said, sometimes it's been reported that she is also in black. So, you see this figure in white or black, just run the opposite direction. Don't stand there and watch. Then it said that if you want extra protection from her, then you can burn eucalyptus or sage right at sunset, and that'll help get rid of ghosts and negative spirits.
I could do that.
Right? Let's go to the shop, guys. I already have a wooden broom above my door, so now let's do this.
Me too.
Okay, so now if you're thinking to hell with all of these tips, okay, you don't need them. Obviously, we don't think that. But if you're thinking that, You might think again, because there is actual evidence to suggest that La Llorona isn't just a figment from some ghost story. She could actually be real.
Really?
Yeah. So there are many eyewitness accounts from people that have claimed to have had an encounter with La Llorona. This includes one man who looked her in the eye and ultimately paid the price with his life. So we're going to go back to November 9th of 1906 to a Washington, D.C. based newspaper article. This was about an incident in a Mexican town, but the town was not named. So we're in Mexico somewhere. Either way, this story goes on that one night, a police officer was making his rounds when he saw a woman dressed in all white, her rebozo covering her face. The officer couldn't tell what she looked like, but he still stopped to flirt with her anyway, because, why not? It must have gone well, because shortly after, he's begging the woman to take her rebozo off so he can look in her eyes. And eventually, the woman gives in. She removes her shawl, and right away, the police officer regrets ever saying anything to her, because this woman does not have a normal human face. Instead, she has a bare skull, no flesh.
Oh.
While the officer stares at her in horror, the skinless, skull-faced woman exhales this icy cold breath right into his face. The police officer is so stunned that he faints right there on the spot. And when he wakes up, there was no sign of the woman. But he knows he was not dreaming, because he's jittery, he's sick to his stomach, and just completely shaken. Eventually, he goes to his supervisors and he tells them exactly what happened. And while you might imagine them laughing at this entire thing like you fell off your rocker, my guy. Because honestly, I'd probably laugh too if somebody came up to me and told me this story. I'd be like, you need help.
Right.
That's not the case here. They took his account very seriously. Like, they fully believed him. And that's not the spookiest part. The officer was said to have never recovered from his fainting spell. The encounter had a lasting and deadly effect on him, because not long after sharing his story, he died.
Oh, shit.
The newspaper doesn't say how he died, but it does refer to the lady that he encountered as La Llorona. Yeah. And this is not the only sighting of La Llorona that I could find that made it into the papers. That same year, so 1906, another appeared in Washington, D.C.'s Evening Star. Apparently in this counter, a woman was seen wandering around another Mexican town. She had white clothing and a white rebozo on, crying and screaming and looking for her children. Somewhere along the way, someone saw her and wanted to help. So they pulled her aside and asked what was wrong. But rather than answer, the woman in white simply lifted her rebozo, and once again, she didn't have a face underneath. It was just a skull. Then she breathed on them, and it was so icy cold that the person in front of her ended up freezing to death.
Damn.
Right. And this was only the first of many times this would happen in this area, with the woman in white taking multiple victims. Until finally, the local papers in Mexico printed what appeared to be more like warnings rather than tales, to let people know that they needed to stay away from this mysterious and deadly woman. Then, just a few years later, in August of 1914, another article hit. This time in San Bernardino, California's The Evening Index. Their story came from the Mexican-American residents in West Chino, which is about an hour outside Los Angeles. According to that article, there had been rumors going around for years about people seeing La Llorona in the area. She was said to be wandering the streets of West Chino at night. Said that she was wailing, all the normal stuff. But the best account of her came on the evening of August 30th, 1914. That night, a man named, I'm going to attempt to say this right, but I know it's going to be wrong, Omegan Moreno, I think that's how you say it, was out on the town visiting some friends while his wife was at home by herself. She suddenly started feeling ill, and of course, she wanted her husband to come home and be with her. Now, these are the days before, most people had phones, so she didn't have a way to reach out to him. The good thing was that his parents and siblings had lived right around the corner, and they had somehow found out that his wife wasn't feeling well. So they sent his brother Cleophas, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, into town to find him and then bring him back home. But before Cleophas could hit the streets in search of his brother, their dad had pulled him aside and told him that something was really weird and that he had a gut feeling something really bad was going to happen that night. So he urged him to be careful. Cleophas took the warning seriously, grabbed a gun for protection, and then walked out the door. A few hours go by, and Cleophas had spent the night searching for his brother all over town. He had stopped at his friends' houses, restaurants, bars, anywhere that he could think that his brother would be. But by midnight, there was still no sign of him. So he decided to just head home. By this point, he was on the outskirts of town on a very dark, deserted road. It was lined with cornfields. So at this time of night, and with how isolated he was, there was no reason for him, to expect to see anybody else walking around. Then, all of a sudden, he heard footsteps behind him. He turns around, and that's when he saw a woman following him. Unlike the other reports that we've already talked about, this time she was dressed head to toe in black. She still had the rebozo over her face. The only thing that he could see were her eyes, and they were glowing in the moonlight.
That's crazy.
Right. But Cleophas knows exactly who this woman is right away. It's La Llorona. His first thought was that he still had time to run away from her. So he turns his back on her. But that's when she lets out a blood-curdling shriek. One that terrifies Cleophas so much that he screams right back at her. He just turns around and just starts screaming right back at her. That's just great. I thought that was hilarious.
That's funny.
But as you could expect, this doesn't do anything other than annoy the weeping woman.
Yeah.
Right? And she charges at him. And in self-defense, he fires his gun. He's too panicked to wait, obviously, and to see if he hit her or not. And so he just breaks into a sprint trying to get away from her. But at the corner of his eye, he can tell that La Llorona is uninjured because she's also running. Which, she's a spirit. I'm not sure why you would think a gun would hurt her.
Yeah, you probably don't think about that at that time.
Probably not. That's true. Probably not. You're probably like, oh shit, let me just,
Mm-hmm.
So instead of chasing him down the streets, though, she makes a break for the cornfields and just disappears into the stalks. She just vanishes.
Yeah. Bye.
Right. She's like, oh shit, this guy's not playing around. Let me just get out of here. So now Cleophas makes it home. He tells his family all about what he saw. And later, he even filed an official police report. Like that. Yeah, that's how serious this shit is. That is pretty much the end of Omegon and his wife. Like, they don't come back in this story. It's just, we don't know what happened to her. We don't know where he was all night.
Right.
Yeah, that's just a loose end that we can't figure out the answer to. Okay. So now at this point, word has gotten around about Cleophas's night. And before you know it, his friends and neighbors are also speaking up, saying that they themselves had had encounters with the weeping woman in the past few weeks. And a lot of those accounts are very similar to his. People that are just walking around late at night thinking that there wouldn't be anyone else out on the streets with them until they notice a woman in black creeping up behind them. In at least one of these cases, the woman in black was close enough to be able to touch a man on the elbow before he spotted her. In each of these accounts, as soon as the witnesses spotted La Llorona, she screamed bloody murder at them. And they did what any reasonable person would do in that situation. They got the fuck out of there. I'm not sitting around to see what happens.
Like, I'm out. Bye.
Right. So it gets to a point where many people in West Chino are afraid to even leave their homes at night.
Yeah.
And then many people believe that the spirit of La Llorona is actually truly haunting the neighborhood. And then that's just kind of where the coverage seems to end.
Oh, that's crazy.
Until 50 years later.
Of course.
When more sightings would come to light, including one well-documented, corroborated incident, which ended in a brutal murder. When in 1986, a story emerged and turned the La Llorona legend on its head. It started in the Latin Texas area when a woman named Juana Legia, and at the time, she was reportedly in a physically abusive marriage with her husband. She had 7 children with him, so the situation was pretty dire for her. But each time Juana would pack her bags and move out, she'd start getting calls from her family members, and each time they would say the same thing, that she had to find a way to make her marriage work, that she owed it to her husband to give him another chance, blah, blah, blah. And as many women in this position do, she went back every time. As time went on, things only got worse, and they got to the point where she couldn't eat, she couldn't even sleep. So little sleep, in fact, that Juana started seeing things, including a woman in white who was constantly crying. Juana said the woman had told her exactly how to escape her situation, and later said she believed this to be La Llorona, and that her spirit had told her the best way to get away from her husband was to become the weeping woman herself. So one day in April, Juana and all 7 of her kids boarded a bus towards downtown Houston. They got off at a close stop to the Buffalo Bayou, which is a river in Texas. Once they were at the river, Juana threw each of her children into the water one by one, recreating La Llorona's crime. In Juana's mind, this was the only way to protect her children. She believed if she didn't kill them quickly and mercifully now, they'd suffer and die slowly at the hands of their abusive, horrible, and disgusting father. Then, after taking the lives of her children, Juana planned to take her own life as well. Tragically, 2 of her kids did drown, 5-year-old Juana and 6-year-old Judas. But one of the older children had managed to escape and run for help. Once the older child had reached some of the locals, police arrived and they pulled the surviving children out of the water. Then ultimately, Juana was arrested before she could hurt herself or anyone else. Following this, she had pled no contest, which means that she wasn't admitting guilt, but she could acknowledge that there was enough to convict her, so she wasn't fighting against the charges. With this plea, she was sentenced to 10 years of probation.
Really?
Yeah.
The fuck?
Right. The judge on her case may have sympathized with Juana's circumstances, though, because although she did do the unthinkable, she was in an awful situation. And although it isn't something that I could ever do, I don't think in any circumstances, this was the only thing that she felt could get her and her children out of the situation they were in. So I think on a certain level, you can kind of understand the mindset that she was in and how hopeless she felt.
Right.
Especially because her family is like convincing her to go back every time she does manage to leave. So awful, but I think to a certain level, you can kind of understand her feelings in it,
Mm-hmm.
So now to this day, Juana insists that she saw La Llorona before the murders. But to clarify, she doesn't believe a ghost like literally appeared to her and made her murder her kids. Just that La Llorona did appear to her and say that that was the only way that she'd be able to escape. So it's important to note that Juana did live with bipolar disorder. And it is possible that this could have played a part in what happened. And from the sounds of it, her visions of the weeping woman were just symptoms of that condition. But I'm not exactly sure how true, her having hallucinations are due to that. It's not something
Right.
I've ever heard before.
Mm-mm.
So that is not to say that those with BPD commit murder by any means. Like, that is so far from true. But it could have potentially played a part in her mental state at the time of her actions. And then you have this situation she's in. She's not sleeping. All of them together just kind of created the perfect storm.
Right.
Now, it's not just Juana who had a story like this, though. In 1965, professional researchers had tried to determine why this legend resonates so much with certain people, particularly with women. This included a researcher named Bess Lomax Hauss. Bess was a folklorist who had studied mythology and legends, and she had heard about a school in Los Angeles called the Los Palms School for Girls, which was technically part of the juvenile correctional facility. So if any girl under the age of 18 had got sentenced to prison, they went to this school during the day for classes. That way they could still earn their high school diplomas and at least have a chance at a brighter future once they served their time. Now, an employee at this school had gotten close with some of the girls, and over time, she had began to notice a pattern. A lot of them talked about the legend of La Llorona, and they didn't just talk about it. They were obsessed with it. As if to the girls at Lost Palms, the Weeping Woman wasn't just a fairy tale. She felt very real, and she was something to be seriously feared. Which, yeah. So one girl claimed that she saw La Llorona while another said the Weeping Woman was known to peer in through the windows of the juvenile detention center. Overall, it seems that the girls felt that La Llorona was out to hurt kids like them, ones who broke the rules and ended up in juvenile detention facilities. These girls were terrified because they thought they were going to become La Llorona's next victims. And Bess wondered why these stories were so meaningful. What was it about La Llorona than any other legend that resonated with the troubled girls at Lost Palms? Which, if you think about it, they're a bunch of teen girls. They've had unstable lives. Now they're stuck behind bars in a world that is scary. It's unfamiliar. It's uncertain. And then they can't open up to each other about how they feel because, they're worried about being judged or bullied or looking weak in front of the other girls. So all of those fears and uncertainties are kind of channeled into La Llorona, or at least sightings and stories about her. So it's kind of like an emotional response to everything that they're going through and what they have already been through at this point. And ultimately, that's what folklorist Bess concludes. So legends like La Llorona sort of help us maintain control over the uncomfortable. It's one of those things where if we know what the threat is, we can sort of treat it in a way. Whether that's burning eucalyptus or sage or just staying off the streets at night, legends like this feel avoidable. But avoiding our biggest fears isn't always possible in the day-to-day life. It also might be why there are so many variations of La Llorona's origin story, because this type of tale develops over time and as they pass through new generations. In 2021, an intern for the Folklife American Center named Kamala Costa wrote a thesis on La Llorona, and it makes complete sense to me. She claims that La Llorona represents something different to every person, depending on who you are and what you're going through. So if you're a child, La Llorona represents the threat of misbehaving. When you reach your teenage years, she starts to represent what it's like to be an outcast in society. Someone who made a mistake and has to learn to live with those consequences. For parents, La Llorona might be seen as a mother who had the weight of the world on her shoulders that sought to escape reality. So essentially, these legends represent some of our deepest, darkest fears, and they can manifest into actual sightings of La Llorona, ones that can feel real in the moment. Stories of La Llorona date back centuries, and whether or not her existence is real, that's been debated for a very long time, as long as her tale has existed. All that is certain is that the story of La Llorona isn't just a ghost tale, but instead a cautionary tale for all. It's a tale of grief and how grief and loss affects many generations to come. It's your actions affect others. It has all kinds of meanings behind it. And that's it for that one. It's the legend of La Llorona.
That's a crazy one.
Isn't that one wild? Right. There's a bunch of movies and books and all that stuff about her. I've never watched any of the movies, so I don't know how accurate they are with the legend, but there's a bunch out there.
I'll have to look them up.
Crazy. I've heard the legend of La Llorona for a long time.
I haven't.
Very long time, I've heard. And the one where she drowns her children because her husband's unfaithful, that's the one that I've always heard. Until I started doing the research for it, I'd never heard of the other variations.
Right.
Crazy. So our next one is a true crime one. We're going to dive into the Princes in the Tower.
You've been talking about wanting to do that one.
Yep. And I got it worked in here. You're going to be like, what the fuck? So it is obviously a true crime, but it's more of like a mystery and like a whodunit.
Mm.
kind of true crime story. There's two main theories as to the answer to the who and the why, but there are others, of course. So we're just going to go through those two main theories because, for time's sake, because if we went through all of them, we'd be here forever, to be honest. So before we get into all of it, no one actually knows what happened. They've not ever been able to figure it out. So the boys are known as the princes in the tower, but obviously that's not their given names. So the older boy was Edward, Prince of Wales. He was 12 years old. And then his younger brother, Richard, who was either 9 or 10 at the time of today's story. So they were little. And at this age, their lives had changed forever. Their father was King Edward IV, and their mother was Queen Elizabeth Woodville. Their father, King Edward IV, had suddenly died from an unexpected illness at only 40 years old on April 9th, 1483. Which, during the 1400s, 40 was considered to be pretty old. So,
Right.
at this point, he lived a full life. You know what I mean? So, before King Edward IV died, he had actually been king twice.
Wow.
So, it's odd. I know. I'm sure many people are wondering how in the world does this even happen? But this apparently happened a lot throughout history. For King Edward, his first reign was from 1461 until October of 1470, when he was overthrown by a coalition of his former ally, Richard Neville, the Earl of Warwick, and his own brother, George, the Duke of Clarence. This alliance was done with the support of King Louis VI of France. So this forced King Edward into exile and then restored Henry VI to the throne. It's a lot of names, a lot happening here. So you're going to hear me pause so everybody can process it, because there's a lot going on in this one. And the names can be a bit confusing because you got Edward III and Edward IV, and yeah, it's just way too much for me. Too many people with the same name.
Right.
Anyway, thanks to the help of Duke of Burgundy, Edward became king again in April of 1471 after he reconciled with Clarence and then defeated Warwick. Along with defeating Warwick, he defeated the Lancastrians in the Battle of Barnet and the Battle of Tewkesbury. I'm totally saying that one wrong. Following this, he remained king until he died in 1483. So there's a shit ton of fighting going over here during this time, just trying to take the throne. But Edward IV had a very significant claim to that throne because both of his parents were descendants of Edward III. Now, this throne wasn't just handed to him. His father was Richard, Duke of York. He had attempted to take the throne from Henry IV during his illness. And he had it because Richard, the Duke of York, had been killed in battle. So Edward, who was 18 at the time, had decided that he was going to get revenge for his father's murder. So he set out to overthrow the new king. King Henry IV was overthrown and exiled as young Edward had set out to do. Following this, Edward IV was crowned king. So King Edward IV took the throne just after the War of the Roses. This was a long series of English wars that had been fought between the House of York and the House of Lancaster. This war went on from 1455 to 1487. It's a long-ass war.
Yeah.
So this was a time of constant struggle. 30 years. Things are not good over there.
Mm-mm.
So eventually the House of York became the controlling house. And now the leadership is shaken up and the succession of the throne was pretty tricky. Because there was a lot of shit that went behind, all of this. And it remained this way even after Edward IV's death and the attempted succession of his son, Edward V. Now, Edward V was one of the princes in the tower that we're talking about. All right. So on his deathbed, due to that mysterious illness, Edward IV declared, quote, "I want my eldest son, Edward V, to be king." And then his second son, Richard, was to be second in line to the throne. So Edward V was set to be king. And then if something happened to, little Edward, then his second son, Richard, would then take the throne following his older brother. So he made it clear who was next to take the throne and who was to follow that. He did this to ensure that his sons had a clear right to the throne, that they were the ones that would take over following his death, and to make sure that no one could come in and take it from underneath them, which seems like a pretty simple thing. I've named my successor. Nobody can have it now. So Edward IV, who is the king, he's dying. And so naming his sons as the rightful heirs to the throne is what he's supposed to do. Following this, Edward obviously died. And those around him were like, oh, well, he's dead now. Now we don't have to do what he says. Fuck his declaration. We don't have to listen. You know, the boys are 12 and 9. Obviously, you can't become king at 12 years old. So as weird as monarchs are, all right, because they're all about the pureness of their bloodlines, who rules the country, how they rule the country, all of that, this is a problem. You're 12 years old. You can't be king. Sorry. You know, we're having babies with our brothers to make sure that our bloodline is pure, but you can't be king at 12. Unacceptable.
Right.
Like, okay, I love that that's where you draw the line.
They have standards.
Oh, okay. So it's decided that there will be an interim king. So until Edward V is old enough to rule on his own, it's declared that Edward IV's brother, Richard III, who would become the royal lord protector of the realm. That's some fairy tale shit.
That's what I was going to.
That sounds like some shit out of a Disney movie.
Yeah.
It is real though. And basically, he would take the place of the monarch while they are not able to rule because of illness, age, or whatever. So the Lord Protector of the realm takes over the duties of king. For us that have, here that have presidents rather than kings and queens, this would be like our vice president, basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I went on like a whole thing trying to understand that so I could explain it. So Edward V is the nephew of Richard III, who is now the Lord Protector of the realm. So at this point, Richard III is pretty powerful, and he feels this power. His head gets a little too big for his body. So he knows that the prince, Edward V, will eventually become king. But he's got a ways to go because he's 12.
Right.
So once this is declared and his brother Edward IV is dead, he decides to move the princes, so Edward V and Richard, to the Tower of London. Which at this time, this wasn't a bad place to be. To many nowadays, it's seen as a prison, but because it was used as like a torture prison for like 800 years. But during the Tudor time, they were, quote unquote, sent to the tower before their execution. So especially like if you were a threat to the kingdom or whatever, once the Tower of London became a prison, if you were considered to be a threat to the kingdom or if you did something like awful, you were sent there and you were tortured.
Dang.
Yeah. So to give some examples, okay, there's some notable figures that were hid here in this tower before their executions. Jane Grey, Anne Boleyn, and Guy Fawkes.
Oh, God.
That is how you say his name. Yep.
I would be so pissed off if my parents named me that.
Say that 5 times fast. See what it sounds like.
Right.
So, like I said, the tower was used as a prison for like 800 years or so. This was a holding place for your execution, and this began sometime between 1540 to 1640. Not 100% sure exactly when, but during that time, there were like 48 roughly types of torture that were used in the tower. Damn. So they weren't just put here to wait to be put to death, okay? It was rough. So I'm going to give you 3 forms of torture that they used back then. We're going to do a medieval torture episode. I have one planned, but I'm going to give you 3 of these, okay? So there's the scavenger's daughter. the rack, and the manacles. So the scavenger's daughter is used to compress your body. There are two versions of this. The first one is it's a weird like triangle shape. The victim's head is placed like at the top of it. Then the victim's hands are placed like in these handcuffs type things, like to the side, and then also put in ankle cuffs. They're also cuffed around their neck.
Damn.
Yeah, it's just a weird,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a weird looking thing. Now this first version would twist the victim into a position that would cause excruciating pain. So it would just like, ugh.
Yeah.
The second version, I'm not really sure how to describe it, to be honest. It almost looks like a wishbone if you like held it upside down. Yeah, it's really, really weird looking. So this one held the victim down in a kneeling position, which is very painful. And then after some time, their lungs would fill with blood and they would essentially suffocate on their own blood. Yeah. So like if this was a person, you know, this is my wishbone, right? You flip it, it sits like that on top of them. Yeah. No, thank you.
Yeah, I'm good.
Right. And then you're suffocating on your own blood at the same time. You can't.
Right.
No. So now we have the rack. So the rack is usually made of wood and is in a rectangular shape. This one is slightly raised from the ground and it has a roller on either one or both ends. This one is often seen in like older movies that are portrayed to be in London. Excuse me. Unlike the scavenger's daughter, the rack is made to stretch. So the victim's ankles were fastened to one roller while their wrists were chained to the other. And by means of pulleys or levers, more and more tension was added to the victim's shoulders, hips, knees, and elbows. This was extremely painful and eventually led to joints being dislocated and even separated.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Lastly, we have the manacles, which, have you ever seen, you know, The Sword in the Stone, like the old cartoon?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You know, whenever the kid, I can't remember his name. Arthur, duh. What am I talking about? When he goes down into the dungeon to save the wizard. I can't remember his name. Everybody knows who I'm talking about. People are probably screaming his name.
Right.
But and he's got his hands and those cuffs and his feet are kind of hanging off the ground. Those are manacles.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So for all of those that do not know what I'm talking about, manacles are iron handcuffs that are bolted into the wall. Your wrists are, put in the handcuffs and then you're suspended off the ground so your feet are off the floor. They would be left like this for long periods of time. This would leave the person in a lot of pain, and then once they were released, they would have trouble using their hands.
Yeah, I bet.
Because like the lack of blood flow and like all that shit. Ugh. So yeah, this was a fun place to be during this time. But at the time that the princes were sent there, it was more like a castle. And many would actually call it a fortress. So first, it's a nice fancy like hotel type for royal people. Then it becomes a torture tower. And now I think the Tower of London, I think it's like a tourist attraction now. They might have a restaurant and shit in there.
Damn.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of everything happening with this. So they said it was luxurious and super secure. So secure that royal families often kept their most prized possessions there, including their children. And then sometimes entire royal families would go and live in the tower during times of war and uprising. Like that's how secure this fucking tower was. Kings and queens would also stay there before their coronation as a way of protecting them before they were crowned. So the Tower of London has a very royal and noble history, but it's also dark and sadistic. So a little bit of everything there. So the princes being sent here for the protection after their father's death wasn't odd, and no one batted an eye at it. Like it was pretty normal. But from here, things went down pretty fast. So apparently, a member of the clergy had come out with some information that said the marriage between Edward IV and Queen Elizabeth Woodville, which were the boys' parents, was not valid, which would mean that the prince's parents were not actually married, and so the princes were illegitimate and had no rightful claim to the crown.
Oh, shit.
So now, interestingly, this would clear out a path for none other than Uncle Richard III, making him the only legitimate heir to the crown. I have one question. Who paid the clergyman?
Right.
Because this is really odd timing. Like, so now a few weeks after this whole thing went down, Richard took the throne and he was officially crowned king. He's like, yep, thank you. This is mine now. Appreciate it. Princes where?
Right.
So once he took the crown, things changed really fast. So originally the princes were sent to the Tower to be cared for. They were treated as royalty. They lived in nice, luxurious accommodations. But now they were being held inside the Tower of London as prisoners. So according to reports, Prince Edward V, who was the older boy, was depressed and lonely, and of course he missed his mom and dad. They said that at one point he seemed to be resolved to the fact that he was going to die there. 12 years old.
That's sad.
It's like, they're 12 and 9. Stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not their fault. Like, fuck. So these boys knew this because they grew up in a time where if you were legitimate, you were essentially killed. So they now went from having a bunch of people taking care of them and, you know, doing all that to where they're now taking care of themselves. So at this point, no one knows what happened from here because the princes just vanished, just gone. So in 1485, 2 years after Richard III had snatched the throne from his 12 and 9-year-old nephews, Henry Tudor had come back with a full-on army to take the throne back. He like knocks on the door and he's like, hi. Thanks for keeping it warm, but now it's mine. He's like, I have an army. You can either walk away or, you know, we're going to fight over it. It's up to you. Henry Tudor's like, no, you've had 2 years. 2 years too long, my guy. So a battle ensues, and this is called the Battle of Bosworth Field. And Richard III died in this battle.
Oh, well.
Henry's like, all right, cool. Now I'm king. Awesome. So now he becomes King Henry VII. Apparently, right away, he didn't acknowledge the fact that there were 2 princes just missing. Like, nobody apparently thought that was important to address. A year later, in July of 1486, so a year after Richard's death, Henry had come out and says he thinks the missing princes were murdered. You have been on the throne for a year and you're just now addressing this? These boys have been missing for 3 years at this point.
Right.
Nobody is concerned. So after this, rumors, of course, started moving around the castle. Nobody looked into it. They're all just like, well, we'll talk about it. But we're not going to look into it for like a whole nother century. I'm just going to let it be what it is. So, okay. It's like, you know, they're legitimate orphans. Who cares? They have no right to the throne. Their parents were sinners, and now they're dead. Who cares what happened to them? That's basically what the situation is.
Right.
Okay, so now everyone's just chill, not worried about these kids. But little Edward was not having any of it. In 1674, Charles II had come into power at this point, which is like 200 years after all of this went down, okay? So everybody that's responsible is definitely dead by now. This guy, I don't know where he came from. We went from Henry, Edward, Richard to now we have King Charles. So I'm not really sure where the fuck this guy came from, but he's here. So once he took the throne, he began to renovate the Tower of London. So the construction guys, they're working, you know, doing their jobs, all that. When all of a sudden they come across a ton of skeletons, including 2 little skeletons. These were clearly skeletons that belonged to children, and they had been stuffed under a staircase.
What the fuck?
Yep. They weren't buried properly, and they weren't even placed in like shallow graves. Like they were literally hidden under a staircase. Like I imagine like the Harry Potter closet under the staircase. I imagine that's where they were. I don't know if it had that, but that's what I imagine. Them tearing that down and then just a little closet. So of course it was said that there were pieces of velvet near the bodies and on the remains. And at the time, not everyone is just walking around with velvet.
Mm-hmm.
This was a royal only thing. So this brought many to the conclusion that these were the remains of the two missing princes. Of course, in 1674, they didn't have, forensic technology, so they couldn't confirm. It was just an assumption, but a valid assumption. So working under this assumption, the remains were placed inside an urn together. And I don't mean like urn like they were cremated. They were like interred.
Mm.
You know what I'm talking about? Like in a Mona type thing. Okay, they were put in there together. They were placed in their not so, final resting place, which was now called the Henry VII Chapel in the Abbey. It's a fucking mouthful. They were placed here for quite some time, but like I said, not their final resting place. So we're going to jump ahead to a little less than 300 years later in 1933. And this year, they decided to exhume those remains from Westminster Abbey, and they were examined by Lawrence E. Tierney and William Wright. Now, these guys weren't the people you would think that would be examining the bones. Lawrence Tierney was a librarian at Westminster Abbey, as well as a historian. He was a very knowledgeable man, okay? And then William Wright was an extremely respected entomologist, and he was the president of the Anatomical Society of Great Britain and Ireland. I'm not sure why these guys are the ones examining the bones.
Right.
I think it'd be a doctor or something.
You would think.
Right. Now, these two men were associated with the Dr. George Northcroft, who was a well-respected pediatric dental surgeon.
Oh my God.
So we have a dental surgeon, a librarian, and an entomologist checking out these bones. Yep. I'm not sure why. I don't know. I feel like they just put a bunch of people's names in like a cup with some like popsicle sticks and just drew them out. Whoever got picked is Whoever got picked is the one that got to dig the bones up and look at them, because this makes no sense. Okay. So I guess, they went out, they took the remains out, want to know what was going on. So when they were exhumed and examined, they said that they were consistent for the ages of the princes when they went missing. There was evidence of damage to the nasal bones of at least one of the sets of remains, and a brown stain that could have been blood due to suffocation. Because the belief was that the princes had been murdered. They were more likely suffocated, and the damage to that nasal bone was consistent with that. Because it could have come from someone, pushing a pillow down really hard, or even their hand against their face. So now the blood could have come from this, because sometimes blood will shoot out of your mouth and nose if you're being suffocated, especially if you're pressing on their nose. Your blood vessels in your nose are very, very thin, so it's super easy to bust those, and you could also break somebody's nose doing that, which obviously is going to cause it to bleed. So with this, it was fully believed these were the missing princes and they were murdered, which I don't feel like we needed a librarian to tell us that.
Right.
So after this, the boys were reinterned so they could again be buried, but respectfully this time. And now with the belief that these skeletons belonged to these missing boys and that they had been murdered, some suspects / theories to the who, why, when, and how came out. So first is good old Uncle Richard. This theory says that Richard III, who was their uncle, needed to get the princes out of the picture in order for him to have any claim to the throne. Because although he was Lord Protector for Edward, this was only going to last until Edward was old enough to be crowned king. And then, unless Edward had his own children, the next in line was his little brother Richard. So Uncle Richard's never getting the throne. So he's not only a shitty uncle, but he proved to be an awful king as well. I mean, he was only king for 2 years, for God's sakes. And he just kind of demolished his people. He had a close supporter of his brother that had aided his brother in his succession. So he had a supporter who had helped his brother become king. Now he's supporting this guy. This guy's name was Lord Hastings. And it's believed that Richard had Lord Hastings murdered. It was also rumored that he had had Elizabeth Woodville, so his sister-in-law, her brother murdered to ensure that he wouldn't be a problem in this whole thing either. So that way none of them can try to claim the throne or spill the beans on what he did.
Right.
Now this guy grew up around a lot of war and bloodshed. So, I mean, all this is just a typical fucking day for him, you know. He's like, oh, whatever. It's just a normal Wednesday. So if he had his nephews murdered, it's obviously really sad. Not just because they're his nephews, but because Richard III was the prince's father's favorite brother. He was said to be the only one their father trusted, and that is why he named him as Lord Protector, because he fully believed that he would do what was best and protect his sons. So it just makes the whole thing even worse.
Yeah.
So now Richard III, of course, wouldn't have done the deed himself. All right. Can't get his hands dirty. He's too fancy and royal for that. So it's believed that his trusted friend / employee, who is the master of horse, which I guess is a big fucking deal. I didn't look that one up. I should have. I didn't look that one up. But apparently it's a huge deal to be the master of horse. I hear that, I think of like somebody being in control of all the horses. That's what I imagine. Okay, anyway. This guy was named Sir James Tyrrell. It's believed that he had actually been the one to kill the boys. And in fact, this guy was said to have confessed in 1502, but he did it while he was being tortured under the reign of King Henry VII for treason. So we could take that confession with a grain of salt.
Right.
Because I feel like anybody being tortured is gonna confess to anything. Like, honestly, if you're trying to pull my limbs apart and off my body, I might just tell you whatever the hell you want to hear.
Yeah, so you leave me alone.
Right. So the next suspect is King Henry VII. King Henry VII was yet another guy who needed a stronger claim to the throne. He had a very, very weak one compared to the princes. Even with the princes being illegitimized, their claim to the throne was still stronger than his. So now, with him killing Richard III in that Bosworth battle, if the princes weren't missing, they were now back in line and the next to take the throne. So in order for Henry to become king, he needed to get both princes out of the way. So with Richard III making his brother's children illegitimate, Henry VII takes the throne after killing Richard III. But by this point, the boys were already missing. So it was kind of, well, we don't know where they are, so here you go. Now you get to have it because we can't find them.
Right.
Now what is crazy here is that the two princes weren't the only children that Edward IV had. He also had a daughter named Elizabeth of York. And Henry VII would end up marrying. But he did not do this until after he decided to re-legitimize all of Henry's children. So now that he has re-legitimized Henry's living daughter and has now married her, he has a legitimate claim to the throne.
Of course.
Yep. So now there's an episode on YouTube that you can watch. The channel is Medieval History Documentary Channel. This episode is called Medieval Murders. So in this one, they talk to a criminal profilist named Dr. Corinne O'Keefe. And they asked him whether it made sense that a guy like Henry VII would be capable of having these children murdered. And he agreed, saying that Henry did show signs of being a true psychopath during his reign, and that he would engage in behavior that led him to remove people or obstacles that stood in his way. In fact, he believed that someone like Henry, with his psychopathy, would have actually gotten rid of the princes ahead of time just to place suspicion on Richard to make his pathway to legitimacy for the throne even easier.
Hmm.
Yeah, so he's like, this motherfucker over here probably planned this whole thing.
Right.
So everyone back in the day, okay, during this time was a little bit psycho. All right. We're just going to get that out there. All right. They had a whole different way of living. Everyone's going to war. They're fighting over all kinds of shit. Everybody wants to be king. It's just, everybody's a little crazy. Okay. Just going to put that out there. So now I'm not sure if I agree that Henry is the one responsible because he re-legitimized his children and then married the late king's daughter. But he did it after the princes were already missing. Okay. And I get how maybe it was part of a plan. But even though he married the king's daughter, if the princes showed up before he was crowned king, even after marrying her, they still would have the right to the throne.
Right.
So, I don't know. Personally, I think Richard was responsible for the prince's disappearance and then their deaths. I think he had much more to gain than Henry did.
Yeah.
Just me. So, that's it. That's the princes in the tower.
That was interesting. I thought it was going to be something totally different.
We have no idea what happened. Nope. That's it. Everybody thinks it's like going to be a fairy tale story. Definitely not.
Yeah, I thought.
It's a good one though. Maybe someday we'll know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now for our last one. I saved this one for last because this one is going to probably creep everyone out and it might cause some sleep issues for everybody tonight.
Lovely.
We're going to talk about sleep paralysis.
Oh, that shit's crazy. It sucks.
Yep. So I've never experienced sleep paralysis. So it's not something I've ever experienced. Some people have it, once or ever so often. Other people experience it on the regular.
Mm-hmm.
So there's actually two types of sleep that we all go through or that you're supposed to go through during a night of slumber.
Right.
So we have REM sleep, and then non-REM sleep. So when you first go to sleep, you fall into in one stage of non-REM sleep. There's a lot of technical stuff right off the bat, okay? But you got to know it to be able to understand how sleep paralysis works.
Right.
So just hang in there, everybody. So this is not when your eyes move rapidly. This is a normal stage, 5 to 10 minutes. It's very, very light sleep, and you can be very easily woken from this first round of sleep. This is when your heart, your breathing, your muscle movements slow down a little bit. They relax. Your eye movement also begins to relax, and they aren't rapidly moving back and forth. Brain waves and the brain activity slows, and your body temperature goes down. This is when that falling can happen. Like if you get jerked out of your sleep, you're woken up because you feel like you're jumping or you've fallen off of something. This sleep is when that happens. These are called hypnic jerks. Isn't that crazy? I never knew that's what that was called.
I didn't either.
This happens to me all the fucking time.
Mm-hmm.
All the time. Couple times a week, I will just be like.
And then you jerk yourself awake.
Oh, it's the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's awful. Your heart is racing, and then it takes you forever to go back to sleep.
Yep.
Like, I already have insomnia, so thank you, hypnic jerks.
Aim and jerk at the same time. Sorry, that wasn't funny, but it was. It sounded like you were calling somebody a name, like some crazy name, and then called them a jerk afterwards. When you said it like that.
That's great. Oh, okay. So after this, you have into non-REM sleep stage. This lasts for about 10 to 25 minutes. Everything here, it relaxes, it slows down even further. Eye movement completely stops, but you're still considered to be in a light sleep. Then from there, you move on to N3 stage of non-sleep. This lasts about 20 to 40 minutes, and this is deep sleep. So this is the sleep that you need to get in order to actually function the next day. When you hit this sleep, this is like, your good restorative sleep. Your brain is putting everything you learned into, your memory bank, and your body is rebooting itself, all that. This is what you want every night. Recharge mode is basically what this is. So in this, your heart rate and your breathing slows to the lowest levels that they get during sleep, but it's all at safe levels. Like, you can't really tell they're breathing unless like you really, really look or you touch them because it slows so much, but it's all safe. Along with your heart rate and breathing slowing to your lowest levels, your blood pressure and your body temperature and your muscle activity decreases a ton as well. There's no eye movement during this stage. Now, this type of sleep is whenever nightmares, night terrors, sleepwalking, sleep talking, and all of that start to happen. You aren't paralyzed in your sleep, but your muscle activity is not like when you're awake and alert. So if, you get woke up suddenly in this stage and you're just kind of like, takes you a minute, that's why. So this is when you'll be having like a nightmare and you see that someone like starts to move and twitch, stuff like that, because their muscles aren't paralyzed yet, but they're very like tight, rigid movements. So after this, you have true REM sleep. This typically happens about 90 minutes after falling to sleep from the time that you go into the N1 stage. Now, you're going to go through these cycles all throughout the night, 4 to 6 times in one night. You're going to get all the way to the end and then it restarts. So now you know that someone is in REM because their eyes will rapidly dart side to side, which is what REM stands for, rapid eye movement. At this stage, your heart rate is going to increase instead of decrease. Your blood pressure rises a bit, not to an insane, dangerous level, but it does rise a little bit higher. Your body temperature falls even lower to its lowest point, in fact, and then your breathing gets really shallow and faster. So during this stage, your muscles are paralyzed completely. And this is also when you have your most vivid dreams, which is why your muscles are most likely paralyzed, so you don't then act out those dreams. So your brain obviously allows your muscles to be paralyzed. This is referred to as atonia. Studies show that you're more likely to remember your dreams if you're woken directly from this part of REM sleep than if you go through the entire cycle and are woken during a light sleep. According to the National Sleep Foundation, your brain can actually become more active than it ever is during this phase of sleep. So your brain just kind of like opens up during this sleep. Yeah. Because people only use like 10% of the brain's capacity.
Right.
So this actually begins processing all the input that you receive during the day. So you have short term and long term, right? This stage is where all the stuff that needs to be remembered long term gets put into your long term memory. Whereas the other stage, it's like your short term memory. It's weird how it works. It's kind of confusing, to be honest. So this right here is why I can't remember shit when I sleep, because I don't go through this cycle for a full 90 minutes. You're supposed to be in deep sleep for up to 40 minutes. I don't know. I'm in it for maybe 10. So this is why I can't remember shit. Thank you, insomnia.
Right.
And PTSD and anxiety. Appreciate it. So sleep paralysis happens when you're transitioning out of that REM sleep because your muscles are still paralyzed. So what happens is that when you're waking up, your body is still experiencing the atonia of muscle paralysis. But you're aware of your surroundings and your reality, but you can't move.
Mm-hmm.
So your body is still in REM sleep, but your brain is waking up, but it's still partially dreaming. And a lot of people experience hallucinations during this because they're kind of asleep, kind of awake. So that's what's happening during sleep paralysis. And what people are seeing in their actual surroundings is basically what's happening inside the dream inside their head. Crazy. So now about 75% of the time people hallucinate during sleep paralysis. This is whenever they see, like those weird figures and all of that. Only 8% of people experience sleep paralysis on a regular basis. So it's typically a once in a while kind of thing, unless you're part of that 8%. No, thank you.
No, I'm good.
Right, exactly. Don't want it. I've heard enough horror stories. So most of the time, these sleep paralysis experiences are some scary shit. But sometimes people will see nice things because, like I said, it's basically your brain is seeing your dream, but in your reality. So what's interesting is that the legends of like incubus and succubus are derived from the sleep paralysis experience. That's where they come from. Now, an incubus is said to be a male demon who will have sex with unsuspecting women while they're sleeping.
No, thank you. I'm good.
And a succubus, your face, the succubus is a female demon who will have sex with men while they're sleeping.
That's fucked up.
Right. Then sometimes the legend says that the succubus will have sex with a guy, gather his sperm, and then transform into an incubus to then transfer the seed into a woman. And that's how devil babies are born.
I don't even know what to say.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, that's weird.
So it said that there's an innate feeling of being suffocated or like someone is pressing on your chest during sleep paralysis. So this is kind of explained by the incubus legend. This says that the demon sits on your chest as a way to get to you. So people tend to blame sleep paralysis on an incubus or a succubus because they felt as if something was sitting on their chest. In fact, these two are so much or are so intertwined that this experience is oftentimes referred to as the incubus phenomenon. Because oftentimes the visual hallucinations, you typically see demons and other things that accompany that.
Right.
So many people experience extreme anxiety during an actual sleep paralysis attack. A lot of people specifically feel as though they're actually going to die during these experiences.
Wow.
So one of the most common sights in a lot of stories, which is really weird, is people see the Hat Man. So the Hat Man is a shadow figure wearing a large hat, and studies have shown that tons of sufferers see this version of a shadow figure in some way. Is that weird?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's yeah. I don't know. I've never had any of it. No, thank you. Yeah. So that's a brief overview of sleep paralysis. It sounds terrifying.
Wow.
Then you pair that with a sex demon and a creepy shadow with a hat. No, thank you.
Yeah,
I'm gonna pass.
I'll stick to my normal nightmares.
Right. Yep, I'm good. Okay, so before we sign off, I want to go back to Juana's situation and the advice that her family gave her, because obviously we know that that is the worst and most troublesome advice that you could ever give anyone in her situation. So this was the woman who, from the La Llorona story. It's hard to get out of abusive relationships. We all know that, but don't ever stay to please others.
Right.
Okay. It's not good. It always ends bad. It is possible to get out of those situations. Not many people know, but before I was with my current husband, I myself was in a abusive relationships or in a abusive relationship. Went back several times before I finally left, and that was it. So I understand that this is hard. It can be scary. And honestly, leaving is the most dangerous time for anyone, but staying is just as dangerous. A better life is possible. It is on the other side. It may seem like it's not, like you don't deserve more, but you do. There's always a way out. You are never helpless. You just have to find those that are willing to help you. So I have a resource that I found. I'm going to link that in both English and Spanish in our episode description. I'm also going to put it on the Facebook page for anyone that does need it or anyone that knows someone who might need it. It's important to remember that no matter who you are, where you are, what you're dealing with, help is always available. I'm going to put that link out there. Has resources, numbers, all of that stuff for anyone who needs it. There's also a phone number that I'm going to put on there that it's for the National Domestic Violence Hotline that you can call. There's also, you can text START to 88788 for help. All of that is going to be on our Facebook and in the episode description. So that's all I got for that. Send us your sleep paralysis stories and your stories of La Llorona if you have any.
Oh yeah, do it, and then we can.
I would like to see those.
You know it?
Yeah, we can read them off.
Yeah, and do an episode on that. That'd be cool.
Yep. Yeah, that'd be fun. Because I've never had sleep paralysis. I've heard it's awful, but send us your stories, and we'll share them out. Let us know if we can use your name, because I don't want to say somebody's name if we can't.
Yeah, if they don't want it used. Oh, we could do that and then do an episode on it. That'd be cool as hell. Like people's different experiences and stuff.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool.
Yep. That'd be fun.
Yeah,
Because
that'd be.
from what I've read and what I understand, they're all different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'd be fun.
Yeah, we
If
should
you
do
have
that.
any experience with La Llorona, or your family has told, passed anything down to you about La Llorona, send those in too. That'd be fun.
Yeah, that'd be neat. Yeah, that'd
Yep.
be cool.
Oh, send those to us. You can do that at monstrous@gmail.com. That will also be in the episode description for anyone that is driving and cannot write it down. Put that in the description like it always is. But that's it. That's all we got for our 1 year.
Happy 1 year.
Yep. Hopefully next year we'll have our pod lab set up and we'll be recording video by then.
I know, hopefully. Then they can see what we look like.
I know. Finally.
I know, right?
Face to each of the voices.
I know. They'll be shocked.
I'm hoping, right? I know. I'll be like, that is not what I pictured them to look like.
Right.
Okay. Do you have anything else before we sign off?
Nope, nothing.
All right. Well, that is it. Come back next week. We have a good one next week. So excited about that one.
I bet you are.
So we got a good one next week. Yeah, it's a true crime one where we head into spooky season.
I'm so excited.
I got next week. And then, I know, me too. So many good cases I planned for spooky season. So come back next week for that one. I have a few photos for this episode, not a whole lot, because there were, 3 different stories and old and, just not a whole lot of pictures out there. So I got that. That'll be on Facebook. That link's in the description, just like it always is. Email's in the description. If you guys need that domestic hotline resource or know anyone that needs it, that information is also in the description. It will also be on our Facebook. I will also post the email address on our Facebook as well, so you can send us over your La Llorona stories, your sleep paralysis stories, or whatever you want to send. You can send those over to that, and then we'll bring them together, maybe do like an extra bonus episode in a couple weeks or something, just kind of read them off. And that's all we got. So give us a rate, a review. Make sure you're subscribed so you get those notifications when we drop something new. And then we hope you keep listening, and remember to
watch for monsters
and don't kill people. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.